Here we go again. I have to ask, where was the outrage as President Obama deported 847 people on average every day while he was President of the United States? Why didn't we see this legislation in our last session? Why are we seeing it now? If you look at the Trust Act, my interpretation of the Trust Act is basically we are a de facto sanctuary state already. And I have a lot of immigrants that work and live in my district, in the eastern Coachella Valley, large farming community, large hospitality districts. And by virtue of the Trust Act, they didn't have to look over their shoulders wondering if there was going to be a local police officer that was going to pull them over and report them to ICE and have them deported. They knew that they could live and work in our respective communities without the fear of being deported unless they got in trouble. So what's the difference between the Trust Act and SB 54? The difference is that we are going to be protecting dangerous undocumented immigrants in this state in ways in which I'll articulate in a little bit. I cannot and will not support a bill that prohibits the Department of Corrections, county sheriffs, city police departments, attorney generals, deputy district attorneys, and probation officers from fully cooperating with federal government when it comes to deporting dangerous and felonious non-citizens. I recognize that our state has many undocumented workers, many of whom play a vital role in our economy, that want to live the American dream and don't commit any law violations other than coming into our country illegally. I agree that we should not be going after those contributing members of society, and they deserve some form of a pathway to residency and potentially a pathway to citizenship. But that's not what we're voting for here on SB 54. The United States Constitution, which we all took an oath to uphold, which our law enforcement officers took an oath to uphold, puts citizenship and naturalization in the hands of the federal government, with Congress, and not us. Yet here we are, trying to insert ourselves once again into an issue that we clearly have no role in. There are no state or local authorities today routinely patrolling our streets looking for illegal immigrants and enforcing federal immigration laws. It's not their job, and frankly, they don't want to do that job. But instead, we are prohibiting these local and state public safety officials from unfettered communications with federal authorities who are trying to do their job of getting many dangerous and violent felons out of our communities. Here are the crimes that are serious or violent in nature, but are not covered even under the new set of amendments that SB 54 has taken. Human trafficking, child abuse likely to result in great bodily harm, assault with a deadly weapon. How many more Kate Steinleys do we need, my friends? Taking a hostage, stalking, solicitation to commit murder, elder abuse, felony with a hate crime enhancement, crimes for the benefit of a gang. The California Sheriff's Association also made a good point that local public safety cannot report a case of domestic violence or drunk driving unless they also had a current or prior conviction for a serious or violent crime. Thus, drunk driving or domestic violence still, for me, gives a good reason to potentially deport these criminals. I can go on, but we can all agree that these are violent crimes and should be reported to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. In 2007, Tessa Tranchant was killed in Virginia Beach, Virginia. She was 16 years old. She was killed by an illegal alien from Mexico who was intoxicated and speeding. He had a history of prior convictions, but due to sanctuary policies, he was never turned over. And last year, in Omaha, Nebraska, Sarah Root, a 4.0 college student who was just 21, was killed by an illegal alien from Honduras, but because of sanctuary policies, he was able to post bail and flee the area and remain still at large. And of course, as I mentioned before, Kate Steinle, a murder that grabbed national attention, was murdered on the Embarcadero by a convicted felon after San Francisco ignored ICE's detainer requests. The Bologna family, murdered by an illegal who was a member of the violent MS-13 gang after San Francisco refused to notify federal authorities about him. My esteemed colleagues, do you really want the next murder, the next rape or robbery on your conscience? I certainly do not. And let me be crystal clear. I'm not saying that an illegal alien is more likely to commit a crime. What I am saying is that illegal aliens who commit serious and violent crimes should not be protected the way this law protects them and intends to do so. This is not a bill about protecting hardworking immigrants who help make this country great. This bill is unsafe. This bill is unlawful. This bill is designed to make California a sanctuary for certain dangerous criminals. Why would we want to inhibit in any way the federal government from deporting dangerous, undocumented criminals, period? Why would we make our cities, counties, and state prone to allowing these dangerous criminals back into our neighborhoods and streets? The pro tem mentions that we should pass this in a bipartisan way. Well, there was a study done at UC Berkeley, which I don't consider to be a far-right institution. And what did the results show? 73% of Democrats are opposed to sanctuary entities, 82% of Republicans, 71% of independents, including 65% of Latinos and 75% of Asian and African Americans. So, what do you think is going to happen if this bill is signed into law? As you heard before, we are going to be a magnet. More illegal criminals will flock here, knowing there's nothing that law enforcement can do little to deport them. If federal authorities do not get the cooperation from law enforcement, and by virtue of letting them hire up to 15,000 more ICE and federal agents, they will sweep neighborhoods looking for these felons and may stumble upon undocumented people with minor crimes that may then be ultimately deported and otherwise would not have been sought or detained. In other words, there are some significant unintended consequences for undocumented immigrants that will even be more frightening than they are today. We have to recognize, whether you like it or not, that Congress is now Republican-controlled. Legislation has been considered to penalize sanctuary entities with important CDBG money to our cities, counties, and our state, which could amount in the billions of dollars. Lawmakers in the new Congress that started in January have introduced multiple bills to cut off certain kinds of funds for sanctuaries. Again, one called Stop Dangerous Sanctuary Cities Act would block sanctuary cities from receiving the CDBG grants and other economic development grants. Congressman McClintock said, "There's a strong sentiment in Congress that I share, that any jurisdiction that refuses to enforce federal law should not receive federal enforcement funds, which could cost the state hundreds of millions of dollars." Attorney General Jeff Sessions said, "We will strip sanctuary cities of coveted Justice Department grants for state and local law enforcement," saying those places that did not comply with a particular federal law on immigration would not be eligible for the money. I urge our nation's states and cities to consider carefully the harm they are doing to their citizens by refusing to enforce our immigration laws and to rethink these policies, Sessions said from the White House. Such policies, and quote, make their cities and states less safe and puts them at risk of losing valuable federal funds. And let's just quickly talk about President Trump. He's made it very clear. Quote, if we have to, we'll defund. Trump said, we give tremendous amounts of money to California. California in many ways is out of control, as you know, end quote. My friends, California alone receives $105 billion a year from the federal government. If you look at the cities, the counties, and the states, it's $360 billion, almost $1 billion a day. How much can we afford to lose by making this political statement that California will be, in I believe the President's eyes and Congress's eyes, a sanctuary state? I will stand with law enforcement and say we can't afford to lose any of this money. Our new Senator Kamala Harris once said, what we all want is public safety. We don't want rhetoric that's framed through ideology. My friends, this is an ideological bill that exposes rhetoric that jeopardizes public safety. I think by passing this today, you'll be kicking the president right in the groin, and I can imagine he's going to strike back. For those reasons, I urge a no vote for this unsafe bill and one that antagonizes the President of the United States has vowed to punish such entities like us by holding back our federal funding. For those reasons, I urge a no vote.